Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Betsy, and thank you so much for joining us today. So, Betsy, what can you tell us about the artworks that are currently on view at Seesaw Art?
Well, as you all can see from this picture, which was taken probably about 4 years ago now, pretty much all the work in the show and almost all the work I do just exclusively is plein air work, which means I'm working outdoors. And we happen to live on a lake. And so here I actually was standing in the water. It was probably in July or something, painting the rocks along the edge of the water. But I think one of the claims to fame that I have, or why I've had a lot of people take an interest in my work, is because I paint all year round outside. And probably, I'd say close to half the work that's in the show currently, Amy, is work that I painted in January, and probably most of it was this year. This year was great, even though it was cold. The sun was shining, which was really a treat. So when I do an occasional larger piece, like this piece, for example, this is called Daybreak, and it was daybreak. Because it was so cold, we could get out on the ice for the first time in 3 years. And so I went out on the ice before the sun came up, set up. I now have a larger plein air easel I can use. And I blocked in the trees before the sun actually came up. And then as it came up, kind of quickly worked in some color. And then this was, more work was done in the studio afterwards. But that would give you kind of an idea of my plein air work, trying to make it more abstract as I develop my practice.
What draws you to painting plein air? And I'm going to call it aggressive to be out there every day in January. Tell us a little bit about your January initiative.
Sure. Well, I think plein air was attractive to me kind of for two reasons. Excuse me. One, New Hampshire Institute of Art, where I was a library director, and I wasn't really involved in the studio art instruction at all at that point. I was teaching art history, but we were really surrounded by a lot of people who were very skilled in traditional art. Whereas when I went to art school, it was all very paint what you feel and don't worry if you don't know how to draw. And I felt actually somewhat behind the curve because I had never really at least felt comfortable with those traditional art techniques. So when we moved up to the lake, I thought, gosh, I love being outside, and then I want to teach myself some more traditional art skills. So nobody teaches plein air painting in college that I'm aware of. So you do kind of just figure it out on your own, and it's just a joy being outside. The winter aspect came in where the pandemic hits, and I've just gotten on Instagram. I'm just kind of getting my paintings out there a little bit. And I find out about this challenge that the Strata easel company puts out. They do it both in September and in January. And it's, you just have to paint from life or draw from life every day of the month and then post it. You don't have to complete the painting. You just have to do something, and so not from a photo and not out of your head. So I decided, especially we live on a lake in January in New Hampshire where there's just nothing going on really. It's like, okay, I'm going to make it as a personal challenge to then do that outdoors. And because I'm an oil painter, you can generally, unless it's really snowing hard or it's just too ridiculously cold, you can do it outside. And so you learn to paint pretty quickly.
I love that. I see the urgency in your brush strokes, and what I've tried to do is include like a close-up of the work. So
That's really very interesting for me to see as well.
It's kind of fun to sort of cherry pick and say like, okay, what are we trying to show with this close-up?
And it's interesting because the other paintings that Amy has in the show right now, there a bunch that Dustin Knight did that are what, like 5x5
Yeah, I have a
squares.
couple of them right behind me
Yeah,
here.
and
They're
they,
small abstracts.
yeah, they remind me of just these
So
little
true.
details that you've pulled out of my pieces. That's really neat.
That's really funny. I hadn't even thought about that as I was making the deck today.
Mhm.
You know, it takes a lot. I remember, obviously, everybody remembers the pandemic and the hell that that was. I kind of went in and was like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk every day. I was unemployed from like, oh my goodness, March until July or something like this, which is the wildest thing.
Mm.
But to give yourself a challenge and to learn something new, but also under some extreme conditions, I think that's really admirable. I remember we met officially, really, or soon-ish, in December when you applied to one of my open calls, and you were saying, "Okay, I'm getting ready to do my January thing," and I said,
Yeah.
"Well, like, how many years have you done it?" And you said it was the fourth or fifth year.
Yeah, this was my 5th year. So yeah, I guess actually I must have done it. 2020 must have been the first year. So it was right
Right?
before the lockdown.
I just think that that's amazing. And I remember you were kind of like, okay, I'm getting ready to like do it again. And I was sort of thinking like, if you were trying to prove something, like I think you've proved it.
Oh, I was. It was a personal challenge. And I have to tell you, you all saw how old I am. It's a big deal to sit. Now
For
this year I
sure.
finally decided, I said I it became, last year was so gray and dreary and I was just miserable and I didn't think I'd ever do it again. And I said to myself, all right, I'm going to do a few indoors. But I didn't and I did do some indoors on the really cold days, but days like this was another one from this
Mm.
January, just, these glorious blue skies. And it was just a joy to be outside in it. And otherwise, I probably wouldn't have gone outside that day.
Yeah, right. I definitely hibernated like all of January and February and like sort of crawled out in March after that.
Oh, I
But
did that in February, believe me.
February is like the worst. Um, I love this painting. I'm going to say that to every painting that I show. Let me just say that because every
He
one I
says
look
that to
at,
every
it's
painting with every artist,
oh my
just so
goodness.
you
Not
guys
no,
know.
no, I don't. It's not
Mm.
true. But like I always try to like decide, and usually by the time I've hung the show, I have like my favorite painting from each artist. But every
Mhm.
time I look at one of Betsy's, I'm like, no, this is it. Like I can't help myself.
Well,
Um,
thank you.
I love the snow in this, and I like that that relationship. But I was chatting with someone who was chatting with you that was saying that this is sort of toned a little bit with some pinks, which you can
Pinks and
see.
orange, yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing to make that color selection under the snow.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, if you look kind of on the right-hand corner, that little slash of orange,
Yep.
that was probably the color that surface was toned with. And then again, with the oil, it's just so versatile. And I have these little tools that probably have like a silicone tip on it or rubber tip or something.
Hmm.
And then you can just swipe down, and it's so much easier to do a tree trunk by substitution rather than trying to swipe that line on with more paint. Especially, I wear gloves when
Hmm.
I'm painting. So finesse isn't going to be my strong suit. Well, not that it is anyway, actually, but so yeah, so that undertoning really is a nice hack almost. Yeah, there you can see
Yep.
it.
You can kind of see
Kind
it.
of a goldy orange. Yeah, and sometimes I'll variegate. It does look like, I just have kind of put some pink and some yellow, and just it's almost all going to get covered. And if it
Mm.
doesn't work, I just pour paint on top of it again.
Such an iconic birch tree subject matter.
Yeah,
I
this
just
is,
feel I feel them dancing like the title says. And I just love there's a lot of like pinks. I mean, I'm sorry, there's a lot of like blues and purples in this show, which feels very wintry and very beautiful.
and it is, painting is just such a joy to be able to play with those colors. And there you can see the little scratching in that I probably had either I had a painting underneath this, or it was just the paint had built up enough, because it's obviously not what that was toned as. And that's the view from a friend's house here in my town. I mean, that's the thing in New Hampshire. You just can't not see a nice view. You know, it's hard to not have one. And it was very overcast, one of those dreary January days. And gosh, if you really start to use your imagination, you do see all those purples and blues, and it can be a bit more than just gray, although last year, honestly, I think it was all just gray. But this is an older piece, actually. I think this was the first year I went out.
Yeah, 2021.
Or 21. Okay,
Yep.
second year. Well, maybe that was the first year.
I love
Oh,
these
that was the first
scratches.
year, 21. So it
Was
was
it?
during
Yeah.
lockdown. Yeah.
I just love these scratches here. For some reason, paintings with that sort of element this year are like really getting it to me. It just seems like an irreverence for the drawing and the line and like the texture that adds, but you're also like taking away when you're making them. I don't know. There's some really, really beautiful, there's some really beautiful moments in there, and we'll come around to it. I'll show it again in one of my other all favorite paintings. So this one, because of the title, but also because of the feeling here in New England in October, in the fall time. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's also finished, and a lot of Betsy's works are finished in this really beautiful golden, or there's a couple more orangey versions on the edges. And they just like, it's the perfect solution to have like a really finished piece that's just ready to go into the collector's homes. But this like, I see obviously lots of confidence in the brush strokes, but I also love the color combinations. I think that's so beautiful.
Thank you. And it's interesting because I've been struggling all day on a different painting. And then it's just about time to go. And it was a beautiful view. And I'm just like, I'm going to try a new one. You know, pull this little panel out. It's only 9 by 12, I think. And bang, you know, it just quickly, you're tired, but you've seen those colors and you've been looking at that view, and it is remarkable how it can just all fall into place very quickly.
Yeah. Like sometimes it's worth to belabor the work. Other times it's just like you're the conduit, and here is the painting, which is such an, I love hearing those stories. This piece is actually right behind me, and I've paired it with this absolutely gorgeous piece by Lauren Carjala, which just like sings towards summertime for me. It's very dreamy. It's very like I can feel the heat coming through from the pond painting here. Really, really fun for me to be able to make that conversation happen. But this has a little bit of a different color saturation to it as well. And that's also from 2025. This is amazing to me. I love knowing what year the paintings were painted.
Well, and this one's not plein air, obviously, if it's 2025.
I was going to say, how did you do this now?
Well, I have a painting that I did plein air the first year I was going out that I'm extremely fond of, and I'm not going to sell. But I was actually, the story behind this is a little bit, I had been in another show that had a set of paintings going across that were working really well. And I had another show coming right up after that that I wanted it to all go. But one of the pieces, person who had the first show wanted to put in yet another show. So I needed quickly to make a painting that was about that size to just fit in with the series. And so I looked at the piece that I had at home, and I thought, oh, let me see what I can reinterpret that perhaps. So yeah, the colors, it was very hard to photograph. Your picture actually is a little bit better, but it is a bit dark. So I don't know. Yeah, you can see it's dark.
The glazing for some reason on it. The finishing, I think, is what's throwing it off a little bit, because it's gorgeous in person.
Yeah, but I do.
On the lake too?
Pardon me?
Is this on the lake too?
No, it isn't Deering. It's at a wildlife sanctuary. We have more land and conservation in our little town. per capita than any other town in New Hampshire. So there's lots of places I can go to paint. But it's a wetland. It might actually be the Kentucky River rather than the Piscataqua River that's coming in there.
That's great. It reminds me, my parents live on a pond, and they have a cabin that sort of is on its own little peninsula, and it's full of pine trees. So it's like the cabin's called the Point of Pines. And I'm just like, oh, this is the view from the Point of Pines. Like I see it instantly.
Oh, right, right. Well, you see these artists that just paint their view or, paint their interiors, most of their careers. And I definitely could do that easily just in this little town.
That's amazing. Wow. I love that connection to the nature and in that conservancy. That's my next question, actually. So we know you're painting outside most of the time, but what does the studio look like for you besides being outside? Is it in your home? Do you have a studio outside of your home? What does your studio practice
look
like?
My basement.
It's in your basement. I love that.
It's not as bad as it sounds. I always think of these poor people in the basement, with the cinder blocks and the little tiny windows. My basement actually has a big slider that walks out to the lake. So it actually is quite a beautiful view. And it's the entire kind of down, it's finished, but oh my. But it's very cold in the winter. So that's another kind of incentive to might as well work outside if it's going to be freezing in the basement anyway. And I just kind of laugh because my husband's on this and he's always hoping I'm going to clean it up more down there. It's always a bit of a mess. But
my husband hopes that I would that I would clean the basement up too, but it's never really on the list. I don't know.
Well, the garage is on the list. I promise Ralph will get that done.
Oh my goodness. This is such another, speaking of water and sort of peninsulas or islands, I love the title of this piece, and I'm interested in how that happened, but also happy to share with everybody that this painting found its forever home with a collector this weekend at the reception. So
yay, I squealed actually. I was there when Amy put the red dot up. It never gets old.
Well, so lovely when something resonates and it happens.
Oh, it's really, well, this is, I'm very lucky to say, the view from our dock.
That's amazing.
And that little island, which looks very different in lots of different paintings, but if you had to pick one thing I've probably painted more than anything else, it's this island. And supposedly the title of this island is Blueberry Island, but then everybody laughs because we have a whole bunch of these just little islands on our lake, and everyone says every one of them's called Blueberry Island. And usually all around, and most of them are not developed, they're small, but all around the perimeter of the island are wild blueberries, and so people will take their kayaks or canoes and just paddle up and literally pick right from your boat.
Yeah.
Last year, there were no blueberries.
Wow.
And what there were, hopefully the birds got. But
I was going to say, maybe the birds got to them.
So that's where that title came from. Quite literal.
Oh, that's lovely. I can just feel the summer heat, like when the blueberries are ready. You've got that beautiful sunshine, and also the composition too, with the island and sort of the top right here is really brave to me to say, like, yep, this is all water, and then I'm going to put this kind of islandy thing in the middle. It's just gorgeous.
Well, and this is another one that was just kind of end of the day. I wanted to accomplish something, and it just happened. I was very pleased with it. And looking at those colors underneath, I think it's that kind of orangey yellow again was that underpainting there.
Yeah, you
that,
can see
that pink, I'm guessing. Again,
yeah, you can see the pink here.
Splotches of a couple of different colors on the toning.
It just gives it some luminescence also. I think it was February. I showed a painter named Rebecca Klementovich, who is from Dover, I'm sure. And she does the same thing where she tones it in this pink and this
Yeah, she's
orange.
a bright pink. Yeah.
Right, like super bright, and she is a super lovely person, and is always like trying to push like the very contemporary, like the very landscape contemporary at the same
Yeah.
time. And she's trying to capture that moment right when the sun sets, and you just have this beautiful golden moment, but not in like a cheesy way, but in like a really fun way. And I love that.
Oh yeah, no, her stuff is really beautifully expressive. I used to be abstract painter, and it's hard for me to go, now that I've trained myself how to see and how to draw and how to do all this, it's really hard to loosen that up further. I just saw
Definitely.
Alyssa had a question if
Yes.
the toning was tinted gesso. No, it's just acrylic paint, which is nice that, I can just get any old acrylic paint, squirt some on, squirt a couple, just kind of scrumble them on. They dry really quickly.
That's great.
Or I've sanded down, because most all of these are panels. So if I really get fed up with the painting, just sand it down. And then I have to use oil paint, because you can't put acrylic back on top of it again.
Didn't know that. So that's how some of these paintings have these really beautiful edges that are, you can tell, have been sanded.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Well, that one that you like that has that, yeah, that's definitely
Yeah, the
a
Unity
sanding refugee.
for sure. Excellent. Anyone with other questions, please pop them in the chat or just speak up. We have some really beautiful scratches on this one. The Heaviness of Snow, which is a larger piece, which is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah,
So
I actually had
what
COVID when I painted that one. So
you
I
had
think I was a
COVID?
little like, I had the show coming up and I needed
Yeah,
to get
you're kind of
going.
under deadline, but also
Yeah.
loopy maybe. See,
Yeah,
this is
I
the
have
fun part
very
of the
little
artist
memory
job.
of painting.
You get to like hear the behind the scenes version of
Right,
how a
right.
painting
The
came
story
to be.
behind the painting.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is like pure summer to me. And so I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but I'm based here in New Hampshire, and I took a trip yesterday down to Haverhill, Mass. And I was like, what the heck is going on? They have daffodils here. We don't have daffodils. Their trees are flowering. What's going on? And on my way to the gallery, of course, I drive down Pine Street. I drove right past the Institute French Hall. And those trees, I think they're magnolias,
Magnolias, yeah.
they are just about getting ready to go. And I was like, what, did I have my head in the sand all weekend? Or did this just happen yesterday?
No, we got 6 inches of snow on Saturday.
I was very busy on the show on
yeah.
Saturday.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like not even a real
No.
person.
But it is coming, yes. But
It
this
is
was in
coming.
June. This
And
was
I
in
just
June
love
up in
this.
Jackson, New Hampshire.
Oh my God. The composition is absolutely gorgeous. The green tones is very abstract. It's very inviting to me.
Yeah, I've done a larger piece on this as well. In fact, that larger
I love
piece.
this one. Absolutely love it.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. Yeah, the larger piece is the one that got shifted over, to these various shows where I had to quickly paint that other piece. But it was interesting because the larger piece, which actually like this one a bit better, but they're very similar. I'm looking and they just mowed the lawn. It had rained, and you know how you get that wonderful early in the season grass mown scent. And, I just had kind of the joy of springtime in my heart. So the other painting was used to be a project, a literary project where a poet responded to the painting with a poem, and her poem was all about people who had died and were buried in the furrows. And like, wow, it is a good friend of mine. But it was just very interesting to see how wonderful art is, and people can have so many interpretations with the same piece. I think it would be really interesting then to read a poem and then do a painting about it, although there's maybe a certain more literal aspect to that.
Yeah, for sure. That's so funny. That's not the poem that I would have written about.
Well, I think she'd probably been to some protests and, was...
That makes sense. Definitely. Yeah, it all depends on
was
where
not in
you're
a good frame of mind.
Excellent.
Just
I just want to
painting
say
for me is a
hi.
wonderful escape. It's really, it is
Yes.
quite, it can be quite blissful when you're outside, especially on a beautiful day or even on a really sunny January day.
Yeah,
Really
for sure.
wonderful.
And just, getting outside in general. I want to say hi to Dia, who just joined us. Thanks for
Hi,
joining us,
Tia.
Dia.
Great.
There's a
Hi,
chat.
everybody. And I'm so sorry to be late, but I want you to know, Elizabeth, Betsy, but you're Elizabeth on screen, that I was just at an erasure poetry workshop,
That
and
Praxis.
S said to say hi.
S was the woman who wrote the poem
That's
about.
amazing.
And
Oh,
I
it's a
missed
small
whatever you were.
world.
So I missed whatever you were talking about. But yeah, I said S, and she said yes. Just say S, and we all love you.
Oh, well, what I was saying to you is the painting that she wrote the poem it's kind of a larger kind of interpretation of this painting that I have at Amy's studio.
Oh, fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Excellent. Speaking of
you.
other shows, Betsy, what have you got going on? What's coming up next for you?
Well, I am going to England with a couple of our audience members here. Yeah, we are going painting and sightseeing. But I do have, I have one piece in the French gallery at the former New Hampshire Institute of Art in Manchester, which is wonderful. Dia, you should stop by and see that. It's all our former NHIA colleagues are there.
It's a great show.
And I also have going up when this show comes down the next day, it goes into the Rochester Public Library. And I think that's about it. That's when I start then doing some plein air events, and I'll be painting outdoors again. So this, for example, came from a little plein air event that Lissa was at. This was up in Goshen, New York, and Goshen, New Hampshire. There's one in New York as well. And I think is it right by one of the DYS, institutions, really. But this unbelievably beautiful garden, public garden or community garden, and they welcomed us to go and paint. So we had a nice hot sunny day, probably in early June or late May last year. So these were foxgloves. So Unity was the name of the town.
This is one of my favorite pieces because of these scratchy marks here. First of all, I love foxgloves. My grandmother grew foxgloves. My mom grows them now. It has this beautiful finishing on the edges here, but also it has that like sanded off part.
Yeah, you really can. Now that you've got that close up, I can actually see kind of the texture of the sanding.
Yes. Yeah, it just kind of sets it apart a little bit, and it adds
where I
that
probably
texture.
painted it really lightly so it's coming through. Yeah, that's interesting.
The colors are so gorgeous, and it's just such a beautiful sort of like golden moment in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. We just have a couple of more paintings left. So if anybody has any questions, please ask them or put them in the chat.
Yeah, this is another one of these views from the end of my dock. The island was over to our left, so I'm just kind of looking straight on. This was, 23, one of those years where ice never completely filled in, so.
Yeah, because you're always wondering, what's the ice situation all winter long.
Mm-hmm. So it was such a treat this year to get, because there are views that you can never see except for from a boat.
Right.
I don't try to paint from. So yeah. I wish I could.
Sorry. Melissa asked, did you sand after the painting was done or before? Or was it like a failed
that last
painting
one,
Yeah.
that would have been sanded before, but there was a painting underneath that, must have at some level, like a pentimento, been coming through.
Makes it so unique.
Yeah, the texture's almost fabric-like.
Yeah,
I agree with
kind
that.
of woven by that spider on LSD.
Stop.
For those of you who don't know, Melissa's my sister.
Oh, that's great. This one also has that texture to it. And this like sort of sets itself apart with the purple and just how sort of abstract it is. Like I chose this little close-up because there's just so much happening in this like small part of a snowy landscape. It's so colorful.
Yeah, it's in a way, it's a pity you can't see what I was looking at because it was the beginning of January before we started getting all the snow. And so it's one of the numerous sort of conservation areas where they had mowed down once maybe all these wild cranberries or blueberries, whatever. They're really hard to walk through, you know, they tear at your leg.
Yeah.
But they have this beautiful kind of a rusty color in the leaves that turn a pretty almost maroon or alizarin. But then there were patches of snow, and it actually was a great day that day. I thought I was in for another lousy winter, but yay, we weren't. So yeah, it was cold. I actually had the hatchback of my car open, and I was just throwing things in and out because I just didn't think I had it in me that day.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
thanks, Amy, for highlighting all these nice bits of the painting.
It's so fun for sure.
That almost looks, the way that you painted the snow in the close-up, it almost looks like the snow is like resting on top of the nature that's below it.
Yeah, like a gauze sheet or something.
Yeah.
Or that it was snowing. Yeah.
It's a
that's
really cool looking technique, though. I like it.
Yeah. I think there must have been a painting under that one too. I remember.
When in doubt, paint over it.
Yeah, there you
Right.
go. Not resonating.
Nope, no painting under this one though. I know this was another one kind of from scratch. And this one actually was from, I guess it's by the only one that's from a photograph. Beautiful up by Bretton Woods. And
yeah.
It was a very overcast day, but the flowers just, you know how sometimes on those gray summer days, the flowers just become technicolor. And it was, yeah, it's just beautiful up there. And I love those spiky spruce or whatever type of trees they have when you get up in the higher elevations.
I love contemporary landscapes. It's so exciting to me because they're from today, but it's such a time-honored tradition too that it has such history behind it. And this is like the perfect example of a New Hampshire landscape to me in this exhibition. It's such a great size too. Like it's a little bigger, 20 by 24. It's such a beautiful moment. And like it looks like
you.
fireworky here, and the sky is really gorgeous. It's really,
you know, I learned a totally cool fun fact, at least for those of you who are from New Hampshire, because you'd mentioned about kind of the long tradition of landscape painting. And of course, the Impressionists, that they were thrilled because they could go outside and paint once paint in tubes was developed. Well, I had always known that it was an American who had invented the tubes. What I didn't know, it was a guy from Goffstown, New Hampshire. His last name is Goff. He's one of the original Goffs. Around 1830. Oh yeah, someone at the museum, Courier Museum, told us about that. So yeah.
Wow.
So that was super fun. Renoir even wrote to the guy thanking him for this development.
That's amazing.
Yeah, super cool.
For people who don't know, what's the best way to stay in contact with you? Is that your email list or Instagram, or what's the best way to make sure we don't miss your upcoming events and shows?
Well, unfortunately, probably Instagram. Some of my friends here, I can see Lynn is here. We met pretty much via Instagram. I've never actually seen her before, so it's great. Instagram, I also, if you go to my website, I have a newsletter that I try to get out about 3 times a year that'll list things, and then the website's always updated with everything that's going on as well.
That's
But if you
great.
email me, I'm on email all the time too.
That's perfect. Excellent. So one question that I love to ask my artists is, it's really tough to keep going in art sometimes. And you can kind of either need a little bit of a spark or a little inspiration. What keeps you coming back and showing up for art?
That is an interesting question. Well, the challenges, having that challenge in January is a great way just to kickstart my year. And then I developed 31 maybe sort of pieces to, out of that 31, I probably end up with at least 20 that I'm happy with. But then beyond that, I like having projects. So you and I were speaking just this weekend about, had this new idea where I want to do a series of work, but I almost need to have a place to exhibit it in advance of me being motivated enough to want to do it. I'm very deadline driven. So I don't know if I'm just, been that rat on a wheel that hasn't quite gotten off yet, but if it works, I'm not going to complain about it.
For sure. I know
But
a
I
lot
do
of
like,
artists that really enjoy a deadline and that it just kind of picks them and gets them going. Because
Yeah.
it's tough. I mean, I remember being in school and then getting out of school and thinking like, wait, there's no more weekly critiques. I held them at my house or my apartment for a number of months after getting out of school, just because it was like, wait, what are we doing? Like,
yeah. Oh yeah. And many of the folks that joined us tonight have really contributed to helping encourage me, validate me, inspire me, in a lot of different ways. So, and then just having everybody come tonight, that's great. And then Amy, who, you want to perform for Amy because she's always promoting her artists. It's
oh my
so
goodness.
wonderful. So
It has
thank
been,
you.
yeah, so lovely to work with you, Betsy. And I'm sure this won't be our last time working together. I'm excited for future ideas and projects.
Wonderful. And I hope if you all are in the Manchester area, you will stop by sometime and see Amy has this amazing little gallery. It's quite small, but boy, I'll tell you, it's incredibly effective at getting people in.
It's super fun. I'm part of the Mosaic Arts Collective, so I rent an artist studio space that is around 120 square feet. And instead of setting up my easel and creating paintings, I use it as exhibition space. So sometimes I have 10 paintings on view. Other months, like this month, I have 44. So you can really pack them in. I just popped a link in the chat to our visit page that always has our current next open hours. You can also book time with me. I have an appointment tomorrow night for someone to come down and check out the gallery for a showing, and I'm just 10 minutes away. So I love coming down, sharing the artwork, and that's it's such a special moment that I do monthly exhibitions. So they're quick, but they're also, it's just really such a fun thing for me to do. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining us tonight and engaging and participating and sharing the time. And thank you so much to Betsy for being in this exhibition and sharing her beautiful work with us.
Oh, well, my pleasure, Amy. And thank you all so much. It's what keeps us going, I can tell you. So thank you.